Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. All right. So there was this whole incident that occurred at a Starbucks in Philadelphia. And you notice I said a Starbucks because there are thousands of them, not necessarily in Philadelphia. There might even be hundreds of them in Philadelphia, but there's thousands of them in the world. So in Philadelphia, these two men came in to Starbucks and they asked to use the bathroom, and they were told that they needed to order something in order to use the bathroom. Without ordering anything, they sat down and proceeded to wait, not buying anything, but wait for what turned out to be a real estate developer. Now, the manager, we don't exactly know her exact reasons, but the manager called the police. The police asked these two gentlemen to leave the Starbucks and they refused. These two men were put into handcuffs and marched out the door, possibly detained. Now, the thing is that these two men had very dark skin. These two men were African American. And because this was caught on video, it went into the spiraling viral atmosphere that we currently inhabit, and this incident became an incident, like with a capital I. And I'm not even talking like a sans serif I, but an I with those freaking serifs on it, like a Roman numeral I, like number one. Like this is the number one issue of the day. And now what Starbucks is doing is closing 8,000 of its stores, or its locations they're called, to administer racial bias training for 175,000 of its employees. Now, for me, I didn't even want to touch this incident. And I don't really even care about the incident. I care about the reaction. The reaction is what counts to this incident. And so I'm going to read from this New York Times opinion piece that came out tonight on April 20th, 2018, by Alexandra C. Feldberg and Tammy Kim. Alexandra Feldberg is a PhD candidate in organizational behavior. Like, what does that mean? Do you want to organize behavior, or are you just looking at behavior of organized organisms? But I think in the content of this article, you can see that she actually wants to organize the behavior of other people. And if you want to do that, you have to be a fucking genius. You have to be a genius in order to do that. You have to be a genius, by which I mean you have to be incredibly exceptional in order to organize your own behavior in a beneficial way for everybody, let alone everybody else. And then Tammy Kim, who is an ASPROF, or an assistant professor of marketing at University of Virginia. And they write, racial bias training for employees is not enough to address the epidemic of discrimination by American companies. Now, what is this epidemic of discrimination? And there's something going on here, and I want to get into that. To quote, over the past 2 years, we have investigated discrimination in customer service by conducting large-scale field experiments in the hospitality industry. We have repeatedly found that frontline workers, I guess the people who take and receive the money and the phone calls, frontline workers exhibit racial bias in the quality of customer service they provide. Now, why do they have a bias, or why are there different outcomes in the customer service that they provide? That's the question. But these people, they don't ask the question why. They just see that there's a what. They look at the what. They look at the outcome, but they don't want to look into the why of the outcome. And that's the problem that I have. Actually, that's not even the real problem. The why doesn't even matter. The how to fix that problem is the fucking problem that I have. Names carry a lot of information, and then they have a link to A Matter of Taste, How Names, Fashions, and Cultures Change by Stanley Lieberson. So you know they mean business if there's a link to an academic book that probably costs $30 on Amazon. Semicolon. For instance, from our names, Alexandra Feldberg and Tammy Kim, you might infer that one of us is a white female and the other is an Asian female, and you would be correct. Similarly, In our studies, we used names with which we know many Americans have strong race and gender associations. Now, what do gender associations mean? That's the question. And if you don't ask that question, if you don't ask that why, then the how will be off. If you just look at the what and you don't ask for why, you cannot come to an appropriate how to fix the problem. To continue, the manager at Starbucks called the police with the claim that the two men were refusing to make a purchase. The manager did not believe that they were customers. Our research suggests that this belief that a non-white person cannot or will not be a legitimate customer can indeed worsen discrimination in service delivery. In a follow-up study, we emailed nearly 2,000 hotels and made a similar inquiry about local restaurants. But this time, in addition to varying the race of the inquirers, we varied whether they made clear their intention to stay at the hotel. And maybe that's the why. Maybe there's a statistical anomaly that has to do with, like, if you have a call from a certain name, then it's more likely that they'll actually give you business. And a business needs to discriminate between those who will give them business and not. And unfortunately, maybe there is some sort of statistical anomaly occurring where certain names lead to business and certain other names don't. Maybe that's the why. But I notice they don't bring up that question. They don't bring up that why. No, it's not about the why, it's about the what. And if you look strictly at the what, if you look strictly at the outcomes, then our remedy will work. But the remedy is freaking draconian. The remedy upsets me. To continue. Indeed, making customer status explicit helped reduce discrimination against minority people. See, there's the why right there. That if you say that I will be purchasing something, then somebody's going to treat you as though you are going to lead to business, which is their job, is to increase business. Indeed, these results are in line with the recent incident at Starbucks, capital W, we see that service workers do not apply the rule that every person is a potential customer deserving the same level of service. So if there's a statistical anomaly. I keep on using the word anomaly. I hope you don't read that too ironically, but I'm being a little ironically. But if there's a statistical likelihood that somebody's going to lead to business based on their name, like over and over and over again, you get this data from experience that certain people with certain names lead to business. And certain people with other names don't lead to business. Will that not modify your behavior? And instead of modifying the behavior of those whose names don't lead to business, they want to modify the behavior to make sure that you suppress your experience. You suppress your statistical lived experience and seeing and discriminating based on your experience between those who are going to lead to a business sale and those who don't. Achieving consistency in customer service is no easy feat. Maybe achieving consistency in customers is not an easy feat either. But they don't say that. They want to focus on the customer service thing. And I wonder if they had ever worked at a Starbucks. I wonder if these people who are writing this have ever actually worked in a job in retail. I have. For several years, I've worked in retail. I worked in preschool for even more years, which is hyper retail. Hyper retail. You want to go into uber retail land? Sit on a playground with 20 kids who are running around, banging each other on the heads with plastic shovels, scraping their knees, needing juice, needing snack, needing nap, needing not to nap, needing to go home, needing to stop crying. That's ultimate customer service. And so I wonder if these people have actual experience, lived experience in customer service. And I doubt that they do, because they're in their tenure track. They're writing for the New York Times. They are the 1% that want to go through and organize everybody else's behavior. Learned behavior? No. Imposed, organized behavior. Good customer service could mean something different to every patron and every employee. As the sociologist Philip Sisnick wrote, employees are wholes with a W, not just roles with R. This applies to customer service. People bring their whole, with the W, selves to work, including their unique experiences, which is what I'm talking about, backgrounds, which is also what I'm talking about, and worldviews. And they want to target the worldviews, as though the worldviews are independent of unique experiences. Are they or are they not? We need to look at the underlying causes, or the whys, in order to see how the whats are manifesting, in order to see how the hows to fix those whys or to modify those whys can be changed. But if there's not a link between all those three things, you're just a draconian, totalitarian, authoritarian who wants to suppress and augment different behaviors, different people, different categories in order to get these outcomes, in order to change the what. And it's not going to work. I don't know if I'm talking scientific theory. I'm talking my poetic theory, but I would think that the science would try to tie all those things together. While well-designed racial bias training is certainly a positive step forward and an important public statement, research on the long-term effectiveness of such training is mixed at best. And of course, how is Starbucks closing down 8,000 of its locations for one day going to change anything, really? You're actually going to do more to roboticize how people act. And that's the problem that I have, not with Starbucks per se, but with corporations, that they want to assign you different words that you say. And you need to say these certain words over and over and over again. And the people who are designing this are most likely tone deaf to how you say those words. And once they start to assign you how to say the words, you need to say these different lines in a certain tonality to every single person, you no longer need customer service. You just need a robot. How may I help you? You just need a freaking smartphone. And then somebody making the drinks. Maybe not even the somebody making the drinks, because that somebody who's making those drinks, according to the order, they're going to make the drink differently, not even according to each individual person, but according to their own particular mood, right? Like the customer service person. Whether you're making the drink or taking the order, you're going to have a variance in your mood from day to day, from person to person, irregardless of race or irrespective of race. You're going to be changing moment to moment to moment. And do you want to have an absolutely consistent product from person to person, from moment to moment? And how do you do that? How do you do that? Once you start embarking on this path, it's death. It's death to creativity. It's death to novelty. It's death to absolutely brilliant works of art or works of, freaking beverages, because everything has to be the exact same thing. And then you end up having everything made by a machine. And we know, I don't know where we know this from, but we know absolutely same things aren't exactly healthy. That organism, which has been processed to such a degree to be absolutely consistent from one moment to the next, aka polyunsaturated fats, or one of those saturated fats, is actually pretty bad for your biological being. Because we are not industrial grade entities. We're not. Instead of relying primarily on trainings to remedy bias, if they truly want to transform the way they serve customers, companies need to make structural changes, okay? We've all heard this before, structural changes. Could you detail that for us, please? For instance, they should standardize scripts and provide employees with specific protocols for managing these situations. So, turn your human employees into robots with pre-programmed yes, no, please, may I, would you like to try this next drink? Oh, thank you. Everything is the same tone, and it's all monotone, because if I keep it at the same monotone, it will either offend everybody or offend nobody, which means the same thing. But even before putting new processes in place for employees to follow, companies must systematically assess the current state of their customer service. Now, who's going to do these assessings? I'll bet you anything, that it's these people selling their assessment protocols. What they really want is to hire all their friends doing all this organizational marketing stuff, right? Oh, you need to hire another division of organizational marketing. Let's come through and organize your thing even more. Your organization needs to be even more organized and standard from one moment to the next, from one race to the next, from one customer to the next, irrespective of if that customer is going to be paying or not. You need to have an absolute product and we will take care of the rest so everybody has the same outcome and go to the same place and act the same way. And if they don't act the same way, it has nothing to do with whether or not they should behave in a certain way, unless they should be the ones who are behaving in a certain way, but other people can behave in another way. That's why it's so draconian. One, it squashes the human spirit. That's my problem. And it's something that I can't actually communicate to you what I mean by human spirit, that which makes things alive. You're going to squash that which makes something beautiful because you're going to try to make it beautiful through all time, beautiful for eternity, by a bunch of people who I really doubt their ability to have like a fine ear. These are not geniuses. Remember that. These are not geniuses. Those who want to engineer society. They're not. If they were geniuses, they would be producing work that inspires people, not producing work that goes around and tells how other people should act. And it's much easier to impose, well, actually, it's not. It takes a lot of work to impose behavior. It takes a lot of work to impose belief, to impose thought. It takes a lot of work. But that work goes into this thing called organizing, and it goes into this thing called these huge superstructures of media and opinion pages and all these CEOs and all these organizational things, right? It's up here. It's impersonal. The work that requires people to behave in a certain way, even though it takes a lot of work, is still impersonal because it wants to be transcendent to the person, but it's transcendent in the wrong way. Instead of causing that individual to explode or to effulgize into something more than themselves, it tries to take this transcendental, we are looking outside of humanity and we're going to go through and look at humanity as a whole from our transcendent superhuman ability to see bias where there's none, to see unconscious things and dog whistles that nobody can actually hear, but we hear them because we're up here. To continue. To detect bias in these behaviors requires quantifying different aspects of customer service and comparing treatment quality across a range of customers. After all, a store manager may conclude that an employee is doing a great job upon hearing him say, "Have a great day," to an Asian customer, but not recognize that the same employee says, "Have a great day. You should come back and try our new blonde cappuccino with soy," to a white customer. It is only after identifying these disparities that companies can develop targeted interventions to combat biases. To conclude, we urge companies not to stop at racial bias training. Structural changes in how service is delivered are necessary. Large corporations especially have the opportunity and even an imperative to be part of the solution. What is the why behind this imperative? What is the why behind this push to create these implicit bias trainings? And why do people have a certain sort of bias in their day-to-day life? It could be the case that there is this cultural bias going on. It absolutely could be the case that there is a bias against certain groups of people. And there are certain outcomes for these groups of people. You can suppose that Starbucks is infinite, that they can just spend all this money infinitely, but a small business cannot afford to not be discriminant between those who will lead to a sale and those who will not. And it may be the case that we could be more generous with people. That's absolutely true. I want to be generous with people. When I worked at Starbucks, I was generous to everybody. I tried my job as a barista. was to make every single person that I interacted with laugh or smile or have some sort of human reaction. In that 30-second window, that was my job. And for doing that, for trying to do that for every single person, my tips rose. Like, that's one feedback that I got, because I spent my energy, my brilliance, my brain, my attention on indicating that, yeah, sure, here we are exchanging money for beverages, but here I am exchanging me for you. And that relationship led to more tips. And how could I train that to other people? How could I implement that, me recognizing you? Maybe I could, but I'm not going to be able to do it through these organizational behavioral things, not by telling people what they could say and what they couldn't say, or exactly how to say everything to everybody in the same exact moment. You can't do that, because you're no longer interfacing with that person, right? You're no longer having that direct human experience. Everything's masked in all of these parameters that maybe will maybe diminish bias from one group to the other by spreading bias against the human soul, against the human spirit, against the human being, or the being human. Good night.